Hi guys, Kaustubh again. In this module, we'll be doing the application deployment. Um, the main purpose is over here to deploy the pod. What we will try to cover is that we will look into the factors, what exactly is the scalability, what is HA, if we roll out and roll back an app version with zero time, what are the ways to do that? The interaction with the app deployment is done via three ways: CLI based, manifest, and GUI. Will not be covering GUI. It's mostly around L1 engineers. CLI based, as you know, the command line is kubectl. That's what we're gonna use. And manifest is a YAML based configuration. If you remember what Docker Compose is, that's where the YAML file is being used. There are some instructions which we cannot do via CLI, so that's where the manifest is being used. All the interactions will be done via master node, so will be, though you can, in the production you can have a bash and host where you install the CLI and the commands will be run on the bash and host, and the interaction will happen with the master node. That's pretty much possible, but in this we'll be running everything on master. Okay, as you can see, we don't have any of the pods running right now, so that's the purpose. We'll be trying to run the pods. Uh, we'll we'll deploy the pods and make sure it works as it works in Docker. Now, before we do that, there is a command I just quickly want to show you, which is called kubectl config get context. Um, in the background, it uses this authentication Kubernetes admin. So mostly people ask like, what account by default is used to manage the CLI? So that's the account which is being used. So to deploy the pod or container, we just need to first understand what the Docker registry is. So there is something called Docker Hub. When you go to Docker Hub and click on Explore, that's where you will see all the images. And that's the image mostly we will be using. So let's say I want to pull an image called Nginx. That's the place where the image will be pulled. So if I come back to my command line and run the command, sorry, my network got disconnected. I need to type slowly. So if I run my command, which is kubectl run, test is my container name. The image I'm going to pick is Nginx. You will see that the pod has been created. Now if you run the command kubectl get pod, you will see that the test VM is actually running. Now there is a piece which I want to cover about this kind of deployment. Now this kind of deployment is also called as orphan pods or non-HA deployment. Now that's because they're not part of any HA. If I delete this particular pod, it will be deleted. It will not be automatically provisioned on another worker node. Now, if we want to know a little bit more about the pod, we can run this command kubectl get print output, and this will actually give us the information that this is a test. It is running, and this much time has elapsed, and this is the IP address, and it's running on this particular worker node. The rest part we can for now ignore, but yes, if you want to go and log in, so I'll just say kubectl execute and let's add the pod name and bash. Now this will let me in, as you can see, and then if I just create a file over there, let's say abc, as you will see that the abc file has been created, and this is on Nginx. Now if I want to check like the logs, just like I check a log for a virtual machine, so I'll just say the test kubectl, sorry, it's logs, you would see that the Nginx was installed, and you would see the time frame also, and what exactly is the IP address, and it's running a Debian. So that's a log. Now if we want to dive a little more about this particular container, so there's, like in Docker we have something called inspect command. Over here we have describe command, and I'll just say test, and you will see that it's running Nginx, it's coming from Docker IO registry. um, Container D is the runtime which is being used. What's the status of this one? There is something important where I want to highlight. Um, it's the part where it says namespace. So the concept of namespace is little different in Kubernetes as compared to Docker. We'll come to that, but this particular command dives deep into a specific container. Now, before we dive into the concept of namespace, let me just delete, and there is no, so it says there is no default, there is no pod in the default namespace. So let's jump to the concept of namespace quickly. So the concept of namespace is in a way to organize the clusters into virtual subclusters, which means nothing but it's, think of it like a project. So let's say you have a cluster one where you have all the worker nodes, and you have one master node. Now there are team A, B, and C which uses this. In the team A, I created a test pod. The problem is team B and C will be able to see the test pod. In fact, team B and C can even delete the test pod. Now, how do we isolate them? We can assign them a namespace. So it's like a project. So we will assign a namespace which is necessary for team isolation, for security, for user access, and you can also assign CPU memory quota, which we will read, which we'll cover later on. So the namespace is actually a feature of the Linux kernel that provides process isolation. So that's the reason. So let's get it done on this one. So I'll just create a namespace because I want to isolate. I'll just say dev team, for example. Now I'll just say kubectl get ns. It's not a name server, it's a namespace. So you would see my dev team over here. Now what I'll do is I'll actually assign my VM to the namespace with a switch called -n. I'll show you. So this is the command, and you will run the same command. The only difference is I'm just saying -n and the namespace name. Now if I just run this command, the pod is created. But if I run the command kubectl get pod, it says I can't see anything in the default namespace because we have not created it in the default namespace. What we will have to do is we'll have to again put a -n namespace and then come back here and say show me the VM, and it will be running in the namespace called dev team. So that's the functionality of the namespace. Now there can be many namespaces, and as an admin you want to see all the namespace. If you run this command, sorry, my bad, you will see that the dev team is running over here. You can ignore the rest one if you can't figure out, but these are the containers which gets created. etcd, API server, controller, and scheduler. That's the one which gets created when you install the worker and master node. But that's where our default namespace is. That's how you look at. And in the initial videos, we spoke about the 4 services which gets containerized: API, controller, scheduler, and etcd. If you look carefully, kube system is actually the namespace assigned to it. So if I run the command kubectl get pod -n, and I'll just say kube system, you will see it gives me the information about everything except the dev team. So that's how it is assigned. Now I want to show you one more thing. Let me just assign another container. I'll just say test2, and I run the command because we have assigned it in dev team. Now there are 2 pods assigned under the dev team namespace. If I just run the command kubectl delete namespace dev team, both the containers will be deleted. So that's the functionality, another functionality of namespace. And lastly, you can also check the events. So if I just say kubectl get events, all of it, and I just want to grep on the word test because that's my container name, you will see what exactly happened with it. When was it created? And it was actually assigned this image, and then it was deleted. Now in the next video, we'll cover the manifest way of doing things. That was all about the CLI based.